All right. And get all the peoples in here. We're going to give a second for everybody to get into the webinar. It's going to be that awkward initial flood. Wait for everyone in. Good morning, everyone. Looking at everybody flood in the door. Awesome, awesome. As we get our PowerPoint up and running. All right. I think my clock's fast. All right. Good morning, Lisa. Good morning. All righty. Perfect. I think we got the initial flood in the door, so we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. Welcome, everyone, to today's WOW session. I hope you are having a wonderful start to your day. My name is Erin. I am one of the product managers here at AIM, and I oversee our member and pre-hire services. So if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I have Lisa in the chat already getting started, and she's already jumping on the bandwagon because this is a webinar format style presentation. So you can hear and see us, but we cannot hear or see you. So the way to interact with us today is going to be through the chat. So if you have not already located it, it is at the bottom of your screen. It should say chat. If you do not readily see it, locate the more icon to the right. You should see a circle with 3 dots. Pop that up and it should be an option through there. I see all the good mornings. I love to see it. Good morning, everyone. Awesome. Hopefully, if you're playing March Madness, like a lot of our office here is, hopefully your March Madness brackets did not go to heck in a handbasket yesterday after all the games. Mine did. I am now in 15th place. It is a poor showing on my part after winning last year's March Madness. So hopefully you guys are going to move forward if you play March Madness. All right. With that, though, I have a wonderful presenter here with us today, and I'm excited because this is a new topic. We haven't seen this one before, and I am excited to learn something new today. I have a first-time presenter for us for our WOW session, and I'm also excited about that. And she is a great partner in training with us. Some of you may have met her before through some of your trainings you've done with her, some coaching you may have done with her. She's worked with us for about 2 years now through Matt Weidman, if you've ever worked with Matt Weidman here at AIM. So I'm super excited. So Tracey Wick is our presenter. So Tracey, take it away.
Thank you, Erin. Well, hello, everyone. Good morning. Happy Friday. And yes, to the point about the brackets, I hope that you keep going on and, end up winning. So as Erin said, my name is Tracey Wick, and I am on a mission to eradicate the Sunday scaries. And the Sunday scaries, for those who don't know, I would imagine quite a bit of you on the call do, are that impending doom that you feel sometime on Sunday because you know you have to go back to work. And so I'm so much on a mission that the actual name of my business is Love Sunday Nights. So that's why you see the little Love Sunday Nights moniker here. So what I find is that there's a lot of, if you look at the research about the Sunday scaries, there is quite a bit of evidence for this topic, which is what we call self-sacrifice to resilience, the unintentional consequences of over-indexing on your strength. And these actually contribute quite a bit to your not loving going to work. And so what we're going to talk about today is how highly accomplished people, like all of us on this call here, don't often realize that certain behaviors, certain strengths are actually holding them back, and that their past successes about these strengths can actually create resistance to change because what has worked in the past, they think is going to work in the future. So for today, as I move my PowerPoint forward, we're going to look at how exceptional qualities can become potential blind spots, and how the persistent use of these strengths, meaning you lead with these strengths, you reach for them in most contexts, they can create diminishing returns without you realizing it that leads to burnout. And then the key is self-awareness, because the more self-awareness you have, it prevents the strength-based overcompensation. And then most importantly is resilience emerges from your ability, I call it conversational fluency, to set boundaries and to keep them. So for those of you who have been in my sessions, you'll know that I'm really big on, this is an action step, all right? And my goal today is not just to talk about this problem, but to provide you with concrete tools when we're off. So at 9:31, you're able to do something a little bit different. All right, so now ideally, we would be sitting across from one another, talking amongst ourselves, as they say, over coffee or tea. But since we're on Zoom, as Erin said, we're going to approximate much as possible through the chat. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to just kick us off with a discussion. What quality or success has contributed most to your success? So Erin's going to be my partner here at the chat. So just put it in there and just begin to think what it is that has contributed, a strength that's contributed to your success.
So I'll get the conversation starting. So, okay, well, we already have people. So resilience,
Yeah.
we have initiative, people skills, flexibility, ability to multitask,
Yep.
reliable, approachability. I love this. Patience and listening, love that one. Determination, empathy. Empathy is a great one in HR.
Yep.
Wanting to serve people, professional persistence. That's a good way of saying that. Wanting to serve people, ability to build relationships and problem solve, ability to connect with others, organization. I love that one. Taking strong pride in work and outcomes, actually listening and then replying, relationship building, team player, um, ability to be trustworthy, all of the above. I love that one, Leslie. Sense of urgency, problem solving, helping others, communication, relationship building, ability to remain calm. That one's a good one in
Yep.
stressful situations. All of these are great ones.
So what I love about it is when I ask this question, it's immediate because you do know, what I like to say is you do know your own superhero power. And then the next follow on to that, though, is have you ever wondered if that same quality can sometimes work against you?
Mm.
So the answer, of course, as we think about this is yes.
Immediate yeses. Immediate yeses. Absolutely. 100 for everyone. Yeah, immediate yeses.
All right. So let's take an application of this. Let's do a little case study here. The names have been changed, okay, to protect the innocent here, as they say. So let's consider Sarah. Sarah's a project manager. She's renowned for her meticulous attention to detail. You might be Sarah. You might be that detailed person, right? That's great. So this strength has helped her rise quickly in the organization. However, as she goes higher and her responsibilities grew, her thoroughness became unsustainable. She began spending nights and weekends reviewing every minor detail, unable to delegate. Okay, that's another one. All right, that's not necessarily the topic today, but that kind of goes hand in hand with the strengths over indexing, and eventually collapsed from exhaustion during a critical project phase. So Sarah's story is what I call a strength over indexing, which is her tendency to rely excessively on her core competency. In this case, it was her keen attention to detail until it became a liability rather than an asset. Okay, so you may not be that attention to detail, but I'm going to make this real throughout the webinar together to kind of talk through how this manifests. All right. So it's really what I say, this topic is really a fundamental paradox of the workplace today. And there's a lot written about this, about from a leadership perspective, but I actually think it's much broader than just from a leadership perspective. I think this particular fundamental truth, which is that the quality that drives our success pushed to the extreme can also be derailers, and they can undermine us without us even knowing. And what I like to say is good intentions can bring really bad outcomes. And I think that this is true regardless of the industry, the level, the function, the role. It's really a human being issue. Just yesterday, I was talking to an AIM client that I'm working with, and this happened to be a manufacturing client. And this person was talking about he's the fixer. Okay, that he's the guy. I joke, I called him MacGyver. So, those of us who've watched that show, MacGyver can fix anything with a paperclip, right? And this person was kind of like that. And he was saying that it's now that he's fixing so much, he doesn't have time to actually do the job that he's been hired to do because he's just so distracted. Okay. So again, another really good intention, great strength, but okay, what happens? So let's explore this cycle. So here's the over-indexing cycle. Now, as you're hearing these stories, you'll see it's not necessarily a linear pathway. It kind of happens gradually, right? And it's something that we're sometimes not even aware how rapid this could escalate. So first of all, let's start out with the first one, which is the recognition and reward. So you have the strength, could be attention to detail, you could be the fixer, you could be the people person, and you get noticed for it, and that's valued within the culture. So then there's reinforcement for this because, again, in this case, people come and ask you to fix things. People come and ask you for your advice about a tough situation with a person. And then there's this default response where, again, the energy that it takes to exhibit this behavior is just, it's so strong because this is your preference, it's your strength, that you then bring this to all of the challenges, regardless if the context warrants it. And then what starts to happen is what once created value, in this case, like the fixer conversation, is now creating problems because you're bringing this situation over and over again. And now this person can't even really accomplish what he's being paid to do. All right. So this is the over-indexing cycle. So let's look at some common ones. So we have dedication, right? You're the go above and beyond person, and you're going above and beyond so much that you're starting to burn out. We already talked about the attention to detail. That's a common one, and it becomes harder and harder. And in the supervisor toolbox, you know, that course, we do a lot with looking at your activities and where are you spending your time, because if you have the same level of attention to detail on every task, it leads to paralysis where you literally can't do anything. Okay, problem solving. This is a big one, okay? I am a problem solver, but that doesn't mean I should take on everyone else's problems and solve them. If you get that kind of strength reputation, people come to you, which on the one side could be great, but again, not if they have to solve their own problem, right? And so the other part really where I think why I love doing these types of webinars is in your self-reliance. I think there's, again, it's kind of what's really happening here. And you become isolated as opposed to actually thinking about how could I get out of this? Where could I seek some help? All right. Any of these sound familiar for folks? I'm sure they do. I'm sure you may have your own version of that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Right?
Raising my hand right here. Raising my
Okay.
hand right here.
So now let's kind of take a little poll here. Let's have some fun. Okay. So how
Oh
many
yeah.
of you receive praise for working through the weekend, skipping lunch to finish a project, or being always available to your team? Okay. So these are for my yes.
Launching that poll. You should see it on your
Let's
screen right
see.
now.
Okay. We want to start to see where people are with this.
Is it that's me? Nope, not me. Depends on the time of the year.
Right.
Not applicable. And if it's not applicable to you, I'm jealous.
I was about to say the same thing. Right.
I'm super jealous. All right. Give you a couple more
People are
seconds.
saying all the time, 100% in the chat here. Okay. Yeah.
In my old job, try, yeah. All right. Couple more seconds, and then we're gonna end the poll. All right. Looks like we got everybody in. And then I'm going to share the results so we can all see. And I am jealous of those people that responded. Not
Wow.
applicable. I want to know who
Yep.
you are. I want to know.
All right. What I would say is that may not be their strength, but there's probably another one that you're over-indexing. Just get curious about it, okay? For that 3% that said no, not me. But I'm with you,
Yeah.
Erin. I'm a little jealous, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now that we've seen the cycle, right? Here's your strength. It gets recognized and rewarded. Then you start reaching for it. Let's kind of think about this proactively. What are some of the warning signs? Okay. So what starts to happen, defining strength feels more like a burden than a gift. So let's take the fixer conversation. That was literally what he was having with me. Help me get out of my fixing every single problem. Okay. That was literally what he said. Help me delegate. I just can't I can't seem to figure out what I need to delegate. I'm too much in the weeds, right? So that great strength of being the fixer becomes a burden. Okay. You start to feel resentful because you're that go-to person. And you can almost see it in people's body language, right? When you start to approach them, you've stopped developing in other areas. So to me, this is the biggest one, right? Which is, again, because of the over-indexing cycle, there's this tendency to reach for this particular strength. And then you stop taking on other areas that may be as valuable, or you don't even think about them. It's a blind spot. So that we're going to talk about what to do. And then a lot of times what starts to happen for people is physical symptoms. Either they get headaches or, you have trouble sleeping. If your daily dose of wine is starting to go up, that's another indicator. That's what somebody said to me a couple of weeks ago. Well, I find myself that it's not just one a day, it's now two a day. Okay, no judgment here. We're in no judgment zone, but like let's take a look. Okay, maybe there's some opportunities to get curious about. Are you overusing something? And then the biggest one I think that starts to happen that I think is kind of a 2x4 across people's heads is their performance starts to decrease, even though they're still considered a high performer and they're increasing their effort, but there's areas where they just can't seem to get the kinds of results that they know that they could. All right, that's on the individual. But it goes beyond the individual. What you start to see when leaders or employees start to over-index on a particular strength, there's impact, right? There's impact to the team. And this is usually where we get the calls, right? At AIM, we need some help here, right? And so what starts to happen is the patterns of whoever it is that's leading that particular team kind of end up being manifested in the organization. So there's reduced innovation, the silo mentality starts to kick in. If you become the go-to person on a particular topic, like this fixer in this particular factory situation, it becomes hard to figure out who else could do those various things because you're fixing everything, which is a succession challenge. And then what starts to happen is, of course, the team dynamics, and then you have, oftentimes turnover. So there's the individual, but there's also the organizational impact. All right, so about now, okay, you could be thinking, oh, let me just get under my covers. I really can't deal with this. I'm bad, I'm wrong, I should be different, okay? Stop, all right? That is not what I want you to do. What I want you to think through is, okay, if over-indexing is just a human being phenomenon in the workplace today, and it happens at all levels, all functions, all industries, how do I interrupt that pattern? And now that you're on this webinar, you have the thoughts about this. How can I stop this and move from this self-sacrificing to the resilience? Well, there's really 4 steps. So that's the good news. And I put the easy button there for those of you who remember the commercial about it's easy. You just hit the button, right? So it is really this easy. Doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect once you start thinking about it, but it really is this easy. So the first is own your strengths. And we'll talk about what that means in a second. It's usually at this point in time that I find people are starting to make like New Year's resolutions about their strengths. Like, I will not be the keen attention to detail anymore starting tomorrow. I will not fix any more problems. Well, good luck with that, because your strengths are your strengths. So it's not about like saying, oh, I'm now going to be a different person. No. We want you to lean in and own your strengths. However, you really do need to explore, are you over-indexing? Okay, there's a difference between owning your strengths and over-indexing. The big one is to give up either or thinking, meaning either I'm a really keen attention to detail or I'm fixing. It's basically a both and. Okay, you need to bring who you are and then what I call a more expansive repertoire to the conversation. And the best thing that you could possibly do is learn what I call conversational fluency, which is how to have conversations about boundaries and about things that are important to you. All right. So if we're talking about the first step about self-awareness, owning your strength, there's perhaps no greater way to do that than through what I call validated, reliable assessments. So here's a bunch of them here. Obviously at AIM, we use the DISC. I'm a big fan of any type of validated assessment Because what I have found is if you're talking about who you are and owning your strengths, sometimes people don't even know what their strengths are. They're just being who they are. But to have a language around what your strengths are, it provides invaluable insights in terms of quantifying from, again, I'm big on when I say validated, I want research-based tools that use a research, scientifically validated perspective to reveal your strengths, your blind spots, and then understand the growth opportunities. Now, I happen to prefer what I call a field of predictive analytics, which is much more about understanding the future versus the past, because you don't really know, like you can't really change what you did, 2 weeks ago, but you can, with the awareness of the validated assessments, understanding who you are, giving language to who you are, you can then allow yourself to own that strength in a new way and to use it when you're having conversations. So the first thing is, if you're unclear what your strengths are, get yourself some type of validated assessment to understand that perspective. All right, so here's one that I like quite a bit. Here's a tool I use, which is called the Harrison. And what I like about Harrison is it has a perspective. This is called the paradoxes. They have a point of view about paradoxical relationships, about looking at the two different domains that you're going to need about a particular topic. So here's one that I use quite a bit, both in my coaching, but also in my sessions, which is about a coaching mindset. So the premise here is that in order to have a coaching mindset, you need to both have empathy. So we talked about empathy as being a strength for a lot of folks on the call. Great. It's great that you're a relational person. It's great that you lead with empathy. And here's the thing, in order to be effective with your coaching, with your teams, you also need to hold people accountable. In the Harrison world, they call it enforcing. And so as you think about this, so if you think about your strengths, you probably have what I call a natural resting state, a preference where you either lead with empathy or you lead with the enforcing the accountability piece. Now, what happens here a lot of times is people think, well, I'm an empathy person, but I really want to be more enforcing, or I'm an enforcing person, I'm the heavy, I'm the bad cop, but I want to be the good cop. That's not the point. The point is you have these strengths, you have this natural resting state that's present, and the more that you can own it and understand it, the more you have the opportunity. So the sweet spot is a little heart in the middle, the ability to draw upon both the enforcing piece when you need to and the empathy when you need to. So what I find that's true for most managers, even though the business literature would have it kind of think the other way, is that what I find is that most managers who get themselves in an over-indexing cycle tend to be leading too much with empathy. They think that if they just understand their people, ask better questions, understand their personal life more, that person will in fact perform in a different way. But for those that have empathy as a strength, I'm going to ask you, how does that work? Typically not so well, right? Because what ends up happening is that you all of a sudden are understanding the person, leading with so much empathy that they start to take advantage of the situation or take advantage of you. And how do you feel? You don't feel that good when that happens, do you? Right. So the key here is understanding what is needed from both perspectives, that you need to help people understand what is the performance standards and hold them accountable. And you can certainly do that with empathy, but don't think just understanding a person is going to have them change. All right. Any questions about this in the chat, Erin, or should I move on to the next piece?
Do you do coaching? And I just pointed out you do, and we will have an offer for those who attend today. So we'll bring that up at the end of today's call.
Okay, great. So again, take a minute, and I promise you, and we can confirm with the assessment, but I promise you that there is a preference you have, whether empathy or enforcing. Because when I asked it in my classes, it's always there, just like their strengths piece, it's immediate. So I'll just give you a second there while I move to the next slide. All right, so you probably on the call, some of you know Simon Sinek. This particular framework is from his book, The Infinite Game. The highest and most productive path forward is found in embracing the both-and approach, not the either-or mindset. So if the first step to not over-indexing is owning your strengths, so then what you want to do is think through both-and. And this comes from the infinite game. So typically how we think about our strengths and how we think about the workplace is a zero-sum game which means it's either I'm enforcing or I'm having empathy. And there's clear distinctions. And there's these trade-offs of these competing priorities. And you have to choose, right? That's kind of like the mindset. You feel like you have to choose between one or the other. Well, in Simon Sinek's book, he talks about rejecting the false dichotomy that it's actually not it's not an either or, it's a both and that you can actually, if you have the awareness, which is what we're talking about, achieve behaviorally these contradicting goals, which would be to hold people accountable with empathy or to delegate, but yet still have a keen attention to detail. So in your thinking about this, what I would like to have you just take a pause here is just think about, where do you have maybe a limiting belief that it's an either or situation or a good bad situation? It's good to be a particular way. And so as you think through that, there's not so much to do with that, except just to notice that that's always seeping into your behaviors, that you're always feeling like you have to make this false choice, when what really is present is you just need a better repertoire. You just need different tools to be able to reach to create the both and. And so if you haven't read his book, The Infinite Game, I would highly encourage you to do so because he gives examples in here. But I love this framework because he thinks it's the most important skill set for leaders to bring to today's workforce is the ability to have the both and approach. Okay, now, the most important part from my perspective is once you have the awareness and you've thought about your thinking, it's not either or, it's now a both and. Now you have to get clear on your boundaries, okay? So those of you, we owe Brene Brown quite a bit of, I'd say, she's one of my favorite thought leaders because she really started before other folks talking about vulnerabilities and vulnerabilities around boundaries. And so here's one of her quotes. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. So let me just give you some of the good news and the bad news. So the good news is that this framework works. The bad news is you may have to disappoint some people along the way, okay? And so that is, when I first talk about it, a little uncomfortable, but it's disappointing people in the service of something much greater, which is performance. So what I mean by disappointing is that as you get clear on your point of view and own your strengths, then you're able to push back on that person that comes to you and wants you to fix something, okay? And you may disappoint them in the moment because they really rely on you as being that fixer, but it's in the service of something much greater. So it's really just acknowledging, and that's what I love about Brené's work, is that she acknowledges the discomfort before the breakthrough result. So that's why I put this in here. All right, so I have a framework for helping you get clear, and I love that. That's my little moniker, clear, about the boundaries. So I'm going to walk you through, well, how do you know what your boundaries are? So first is clarify your non-negotiables, and we'll talk about that. Second is lay the groundwork early. So now that you have this framework, you want to use it, because a lot of times what happens for people is they get too far down a road and then they're just kind of in this over-indexing cycle, when in fact, if you really were clear at the beginning, you would know what your non-negotiables are, and you could start from the very beginning of a conversation with a manager or an employee. Now, I put express boundaries with confidence because what somebody said to me a couple of weeks ago in one of my coaching sessions was that she used the framework, but at the end she apologized, that she couldn't stop saying, I'm really sorry, I'm really sorry, I'm really sorry. So if you're that person, okay, and you're saying, I'm sorry, I don't mean to, like, you're undermining your own power in this. So when I talk about expressing your boundaries with confidence, your goal is to be able to, facilitate these conversations without saying, I'm sorry, okay? You may feel like you're sorry about it because you're disappointing this person. That's what she was telling me. But you don't need to say it, okay? You can just express your boundaries with confidence. So I put that in there. Adapt and assess. So this is a fluid dynamic, okay, especially in today's world. you really have to adapt and assess regularly. This is not just a one and done. So I'm going to dispel that myth right there. And then the last one is reinforce with conversational fluency. And there's no better way to do that, what I call conversational fluency, than to have scripts. So I'll give you an example of a script on common challenges that you might face. All right, so let's start with number one. So clarify your non-negotiables. So how many of you have sat down and really understood your personal limits in key domains? Your time, your energy. This is a big one, especially I'm a working mom, right? For us working moms, like, there's energy that goes with permission slips and whether they're doing a course, over the summer, like, right? And so there's just a lot of process that you have. So you may have this in your work, but then it comes into your personal life, right? Emotional bandwidth. So some people are people, some are not. Some people really like fixing problems, some are not. So how much of your workload has moved into areas that you're not as comfortable? And then, of course, just your professional scope. All right, so I'm going to give you a second here. How many people, here's a simple way to kind of assess, clarify your non-negotiables. How much white space is on your calendar?
Zero.
Okay, exactly. So, these concepts sometimes are conceptual, but let's make it real, right? How much white space is on your calendar?
Not much, 10%. I
Yeah.
have focus time. Oh, I like that one. I have focus time, but I end up overlooking it or overbooking it. You can't do that. If you schedule focus time, you can't overbook it.
Yes.
That's that's not good.
It's not good, right?
50%. Uh, but I have white space, but it's normally taken up by walk-in issues. So,
All right, so I'm going to tell you, that's not white space, people. That's let's go back up here. That's emotional bandwidth creep, right? Scope creep. It's energy. People, you think you have this white space of an hour and then knock, knock, hello, right? So you can ask yourself, just as a good, like, again, how do I apply this? Once a week, look at your calendar, start out Mondays and say, how much white space do I have on my calendar? Oh, not enough. And so here's where it starts to get disappointing. Start canceling meetings, start moving meetings, okay? I'm not saying don't do your job. I'm simply saying, look at your level of effectiveness. Mm-hmm. Now, some people don't want white space. That might not be your thing. So let's go to number two. How about what percentage of your daily activities do you enjoy? So the magic number for research, just so you know, you can tell I love research, right, is 75%. So if you are at 60 or you are at 40, but you once were at 75, but now you're fixing everything in the plant, okay? You're not enjoying that. You like to do it some of the time. So what percentage, if you had to ballpark it, of your daily activities do you actually enjoy? Let's see, what are we seeing here in the chat, Erin?
75%. Marie Kondo, your calendar, people. Marie Kondo, your daily activities.
Okay, I love it. Yeah.
75%, 50%. I love doing HR and helping people. I don't like to disappoint, but overbooking gets me down. That depends on the day and issues at the time. LOL. Oh, we were seeing some 85,
Yeah, look at that.
70, 50%, 70, 75% sounds about right. Yeah, so it's a mix, but I don't love the 50% I'm seeing.
Yeah. All right. So those are, again, if you want to clarify your non-negotiables, is easy. Just ask yourself how much white space and what percentage. So if you are the 50 or you are the 40, and it, by the way, I'm a realist. I think that people know that about me. So it does depend, right? It depends on the time, depends on the season. Sometimes, I mean, if you're open enrollment, I know a lot of people don't love open enrollment because there's a lot of particles. It's not just about the people. There's a lot of, HR administration. I understand that. It would just be that if it's 365 days a year that you are at that, okay? Mm-hmm. So the key is just to ask yourself, how much white space and then what percentage am I actually enjoying? All right? All right, so then once you have that, then what you want to start to think through is, okay, and so let's use the white space people. That's actually a great example. You want to lay the groundwork, meaning you want to set your expectations about your calendar, why you have the white space during either your onboarding or if you're just for your team. Hey, on Tuesdays, my white space is 4 to 6. Here's why. again, in just be clear and articulate them, because I think if people understood that the white space on your calendar is actually for you and your productivity, they may think twice before knocking on your door. Or you could say, I'd like to schedule, if you want to see me, you can schedule. Okay. And so incorporate these discussions into your regular workflow and make it normalize. What I like to say is normalize this type of behavior in your team, because then you're able to have the dialogue about what does Erin need, different from what Matt needs, different from what Tracey needs, right? And the other thing is people don't often document the scope and protocol. So I'm really big on follow-up emails. Hey, we agreed to this. Here's why. A lot of people love, my business partner loves apps. I'm not an app lover. She's calling me all the time with, here's a new app we can do to organize our workflow. That works for her. Okay. You could do it in Teams. You can do it in Mondays. There's no shortage of ways that you can actually document the agreements and scope. And for some people, that's really important. So again, these are just things that you can do in terms of laying the groundwork for a really great working foundation around these concepts. Okay. Next piece, express with confidence. So here's where, the rubber meets the road. So use clear, direct language without apologizing. So I've even seen it a little bit in the chat, which is I have the white space, but then it gets taken up, right? I don't want to disappoint people. That's why I call this out. It is counterintuitive for some of the folks. And here's the thing, don't apologize. It's about what you need, and you are in this equation. And so if you frame the boundary, the reason you have this white space is for you to renew, for the team to focus on team. You create this mutual benefit. People can understand this. They actually can get behind you, and they will empower what you need. And so the other thing that I think sometimes happen, and this coaching client was telling me this, is sometimes when we have a request and we're expressing it, we tend to go on and on and on and on and on with the story, because we feel like, again, there's an emotion kind of on this side, right, with us. Just provide simple explanations without over explaining. There's another book that I read last year because I'm trying to get a book done. People know this. I've been writing, like, I'm just as bad about some of this myself, by the way, in terms of like taking on new projects. And so I'm trying to get this book done. And so I read this book called, I think it's Slow Work by Cal Newport. He's a neuroscientist at Stanford. And he talks about how you just need to be able to provide simple explanations, don't over explain, and be willing to disappoint. So the more you can use I statements focused on, I need to get this book done, or I need this time, the more people understand it, that it's a need, not a complaint. Okay. This is dynamic. It's not something, like I said, that's a one and done. You have to adapt and assess regularly based on, and we saw that in the chat, the workflow, the season. The other thing that I want to say, I use in some of my team coaching that I do, I talk about every time there's a change in a person, a process, there is a setback in terms of your dynamics of how you work. So you really do need to adapt and assess regularly your protocols and how people are working anytime there's a change, because you have to allow for people to understand each other and to get to know one another and recognize this. And it can certainly change based on the seasons or the project. And so again, it's something that is, if you incorporate this as just good daily hygiene or weekly hygiene, it's much better than if you just think, well, I communicated what I needed at the beginning of the year. No. It's a dynamic process. All right. Final piece is it all really lives in the conversations that you're having with your team. Really, it begins with yourself, having the conversations about what do you need, and then being able to, what I call, I'm really big on scripts and protocols for common boundary challenges. So what you really want to think about are, what are some of the things that you struggle with? Is it a work-life balance that my door is open, but oh, here they are. They're coming in when I really need to be productive. I really have a hard time holding people accountable to deadlines. communication issues. So if you think through this, there are common things that probably come up again and again and again, where your tendency would be to over-index when this is where you need the either or thinking. You need to think through, okay, rather than try to lead through empathy here, this is not something I need to be more about holding them accountable to a missed deadline. How do I do that? Well, in one of the AIM, actually, I think it's in several of the AIM courses, we teach what's called the SORO model. And I just think it's a great framework that you can use, which is simply state the statement. What do you want to discuss? Here's the observation, again, using some of the language we're talking about, non-judgmental behavioral terms. What's the result and the request that you're making from an alternative action? And then what is the outcome? So this is just a great framework that you can use for any situation, but I'm going to show you an example of one that I've done, and you should steal it and you should use it this afternoon, okay?
Wait, you're giving us permission to steal it?
Absolutely. I tell people steal all the time, okay? So here's one, sample script. All right. I've noticed that I've been receiving work emails and messages during evenings and weekends. Last Sunday, I received 3 urgent requests that interrupted my family time. Okay, how many people have gotten that email? It's the blunt instrument. This is contributing to your Sunday scaries, right? And you're like, oh no, my boss. Yes, right? Okay.
Yep.
Yes. All right. So I've noticed, you see the I statement there? Okay. So the observation, when this happens, I feel overwhelmed, unable to disconnect from work. Having clear boundaries around my personal time is important for my well-being and ability to be effective when I'm working. Okay. You may not use this language exactly, but it's pretty good. Okay. You know, some aspect of it. So then what's your request? Well, I would appreciate if non-emergency work communications could be limited to business hours, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Okay, do you see how we're being specific here? We're not saying I'm not talking to you. We're just simply saying, here's what urgent, right? And if something is truly urgent, please market it as such as the subject line. Now you could say something else like I'm willing to look at this on Monday mornings, or, you know, you basically just have to be clear what is your request and speak it in specifics. All right, so then let's keep going. So then what happens, right? So then that you also add to the request, which is, I understand that sometimes deadlines come up and you might need information quickly. I'm happy to discuss what constitutes true emergencies. That would be another question I'd ask you. How many people have actually defined what is an emergency? Because, you know, not everything is as important as everything else, even if you're acting that way. I encourage you to take a step back. It's not. And then the outcome is, my hope is that we can establish a healthy work-life balance that respects everyone's personal time while ensuring the team's success. So you see, it's a mutual benefit. And this would help me both be present more at work and in my personal life. Okay. So there are standard kind of boundary templates that I've created. And I would encourage you to do the same using the SORO, because it's just a great framework to kind of follow through with it. So when you have them, what I always tell people is resist your tendency to wing it. Take your script and literally read the script for the first few times until you get comfortable. And then you'll get to a place where you actually are coming from a perspective that is statement, observation. It'll become more natural. But what I would say is, out of the gate is when you start, if you just start to wing it, is when you start to speak too much, or you start to, oh, I'm really sorry that I'm pushing back on the time, but I really need the Sunday night. No. That diminishes your own personal power in the matter. And then you're relying more on your strengths. Here, if you stick to the script, and I've given this challenge in my classes, and people have always come back and said, you're absolutely right. When I stuck to the script, it went really well. So again, develop common scripts for the different situations where you think you're over-indexing, and then just use them. You can obviously, you know, change them up slightly based on the individual, but don't rely on just kind of what wings, you know, your what comes off the top of your head to wing it, because that's when it starts to go very badly. Yes, question.
So people are loving this, and borrow shamelessly stolen. They love it. So I did have a note here, and I want to bring up, so Julie mentioned that they actually have an HR mailbox. where they have an auto reply set up. I love that idea for those HR people here who have the capability for their IT team to have like a dedicated HR box where they can set something up with an auto reply situation. Love that idea.
Yeah.
There was this comment from Stephanie. So these are more if you, your scripts that are here are more if you get the emails to you, how to respond to protect your peace, your
Yes,
boundaries kind of
exactly.
situation.
Right.
But Stephanie's question is more of, um, she had like add this to the bottom of your email signature question mark. Is that how you use it? Those wouldn't be how you use that, but what would you recommend? Like, could you have something in your email signature saying, my response time is XYZ, or like,
Yes.
what would you kind of recommend, like, as like you are sending out communications to people, like in your expectations, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, I love it because people are immediately thinking about how to use this information, which is how I design it. So a couple things. So that is correct, Erin. These are not, I would not recommend putting this script at the bottom of your email. Okay. That's not how I would do it. This is more the teaching is around here's a model, use the Soro model to develop scripts for things that you know are causing you issues where you're over indexing. This is a very common one in terms of people's responsiveness. Okay, that's why I picked it. But you could do this across any over indexing strength, which is to use this framework to speak in a way that you could set boundaries with your team. Okay. Now, about the email signature, I actually think that's a great idea, which is I will respond within 48 hours. A lot of times you hear people on their voicemails too. If this is urgent, please text me. Otherwise, I will respond to this email, to this voicemail within 48 hours. Okay. So the point is to be specific and to be clear about your boundaries, that if it's urgent, you're going to respond right away. But urgent isn't a lot of what people get in their voicemail or their emails. And if you are treating every single request as urgent because you are that responsive person, that's when you're over relying on your strength and it's causing you problems. So to the extent that you can be specific, sometimes the other thing too is that you can have email protocols. So when I was talking about document protocols, when I was working at Bank of America, we had very specific protocols for the subject line, meaning request needed, action needed, FYI email only. So that's another suggestion, is to have shared protocols about how you engage with voicemail and emails. And what that starts to do is it automatically sets up a level of efficiency about how you work together so that people aren't wondering, well, is this something I need to respond to right away? Or is this something that I can take the time?
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Awesome. That was the only question I saw that I kind of wanted to address real time. So
Yeah.
perfect.
Okay. All right. Very good. So now, as we wrap up, I also have written about this. So here's some other articles. I'm really big on boundaries. So here's one about how to stay engaged at work without burning out. I also have 3 ways to protect yourself and your time. That's in Fast Company. So check that out because there's also like scripts in here in these articles.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'm going to call it a recap here because basically we're done with our content. We can open it up to Q&A. So,
Absolutely.
all right, if you're over indexing, what do we do about it? Well, your exceptional qualities can become potential blind spots. Persistent use can lead to diminishing returns. I think we saw that in the chat. The
Mm.
way to interrupt this pattern, one is to understand that it exists in everyone, across function, across industry. You're not bad or wrong, right? It is just a human phenomenon. Your self-awareness, again, I'm big on using analytics to really understand and own from a behavior perspective, because then it leads to you understanding where you might be overusing that. And the big one is your conversational fluency, which is just a fancy way for saying speaking in a way to be heard, okay, about your boundaries, boundaries, boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So with
Absolutely.
that, we can open it up for questions or see if anyone has any comments.
Well, while we have people typing in maybe any questions they have, and things like that. So you had gone and mentioned something about your fixer situation early on, where you were kind of talking like you're constantly fixing situations. People bring situations to you. HR deals with that a lot. We're
Yes.
constantly solving problems for people, inserting ourselves in conversations, and that is our role sometimes. I do want to point out sometimes we do a disservice to people if we're constantly fixing their problems and we're hindering their development in sometimes. So if we think about that and we're constantly not pushing back and saying, why don't you solve your own, I don't want to say solve your own problem, but
Yes,
like
right.
if we're not setting that boundary, we are doing a disservice to that person as well in their own growth. So if we think about it that way and we set our own boundaries in that sense, that is helpful sometimes for their own growth. So it is not us just not being nice and constantly saying sorry, we don't want to help. It is also doing a service on that end. So just kind of thinking about it in that context. That being said, we do have a special offer. I did mention that early on. Tracey is one of our partners, and she does a lot of coaching with us. And I think what's it's the leadership paradox.
Leadership paradox. Yep.
Why don't you talk about it a little bit, what that assessment does,
Yeah.
and I think Matt might be on the call. He may have hopped off. He may be able to chime in as well.
Yeah.
But why don't you talk about it a bit?
Sure. So one of the things that I talk about is name it to tame it. Okay, which is giving language around um, what you might just find yourself, some of that experience of overwhelm or burnout, and you're not really sure why, especially if you're a high achiever, right? Or to your point, Aaron, you love helping people. So then what I like to do is I love assessments. And the one that I'm using it's called the paradox of leadership assessments, is it gives you the language for why you might be feeling, wow, I have this strength, but I should feel good about it, but I don't. All right. So what I'd like to offer is people the opportunity to take the assessment, and then I would do a debrief. And then you could look and see how people's, like where you are in terms of, oh yeah, I didn't realize how much I'm overusing this particular aspect of what my strengths are, and I'm bringing it to every situation, and it's causing me diminishing returns. So that's kind of the framework of how I think about it. And I use it in coaching. I use it a lot with teams, because once you have the common language, that's the name it to tame it, then we can, just like when you have the protocols about your emails, you are all on the same page about what's going on, and it gives you greater effectiveness. So that's the goal.
Awesome. So with that, if you sign up for some coaching sessions with AIM, you will get that leadership paradox assessment for free with those coaching sessions, and they will be through Tracey. So you will get time with Tracey, you will develop your skills, you will get some coaching, and this is not just for you. You can open it up to others within your organization as well. I will send out a flyer with all the information you need to connect with Matt and Tracey to take advantage of that offer. And if you're interested, you will have Matt's Calendly link to set up a meeting, talk through further what your needs are, what you are hoping to gain, and book some time. And then Tracey also does other courses with us, and she is local to the Peoria, Chicago area. So she does in-person trainings over in our Peoria area. So if you are in our Illinois market, she is a great partner there. So with that, I don't know that there were any questions. But if you have lingering questions after today, I can kick those over to them, and we'll get those answered. Otherwise, I'll give you guys some time back in your day. You'll get 7 minutes to, oh, okay. Well, hold on. We did have a question. Emily has colleagues bombard me as soon as I walk in the door with questions, needing my help, etc. I need time when I arrive to get settled. Oh, I have that happen. And this bombardment, even if they say, come find me when you get settled, makes me nuts. How can I stop them from doing this?
Mm, I I think we need a coaching session, Emma. I'm sorry. I mean, not to be like, I just think I could help you. Okay. You're going to have to get comfortable with disappointing. I'm sorry. And there's just not, the steps are the same, but we have to get comfortable with like letting people know you need time to just take a breath before they start bombarding you.
Yeah, Emily, same here. Like literally there are some of our fellow colleagues here at AIM that they really want our attention. They need our help because they want us to help them help you as members. And I literally will walk in the door some days and I haven't even take off my backpack. And they're saying, "Hey, Erin." And I love that. I love that they want my help and my attention. But I'm like, I haven't even opened my computer yet. I can't even help you. So
So,
it,
Emily or Erin, have you said that? Have you said, let me get my backpack off first? Like, here's a boundary. Like, I need to have my
yes.
backpack and my computer set up. Okay.
Yep, it is more of the whole I can't even assist you because I don't even have my computer on yet. Can you hold for just a minute while I set my stuff down? So yeah, it is the whole yeah, to your point, Tracy, it is the whole I'm sorry, you're gonna have to hold until just wait. Just wait until I'm ready. Disappointment is a thing in life. We we all have to learn to disappoint.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason I put it in here is that it's uncomfortable, particularly I find for HR leaders, but the same with all the people like and the relationship folks like myself. I'm a big relationship person. I want to make a difference with you. And it's uncomfortable sometimes to take a step back and say, I can't fix everyone's problems. I need to empower them to fix their own. Or I need to be able to sit down and get myself ready for the week before I start answering questions. And so what I find is to call out that level of disappointment, and both Brene Brown and also Cal Newport talk about it in their books, is to embrace that disappointment. And then after you've done it a few times, it gets a little bit easier to do because people understand your needs better. And then they see the impact on the team where you've helped them solve a problem versus fixing it for them. Or you are now able to be present in a meeting because you've got your week all planned. And then they start to see the benefit of those behaviors. And then you're more inclined the next time around to embrace this. It gets a little easier. So I just want to say, go ahead, people, jump in the disappointment water. It's okay. All right. Because it's in the service of greater effectiveness.
Awesome. And I love Matt's shameless plug for assertive communication training. If anyone needs it, we do offer it here at AIM. Because it is going to be, sometimes we have to say no. So if you struggle with assertive communication, I have taken that course. It is lovely. I don't know that I actually became more assertive because I still struggle with it, but it is lovely.
It's a journey, Erin.
It
It's a
is a
journey.
journey.
Okay. It's not a destination. It's a
It
journey
is
you're on.
journey, and if you actually practice it in real time, I don't know that I practice it enough to make it effective. But all right, it looks like those were all the questions. Thank you so much for your time, Tracey. This was an awesome session. I think it is relevant, timely, as we are HR individuals. We just go through so much sometimes and we don't think about ourselves enough. And I think this was such a great conversation to have with the group here. And it's such a great takeaway for our own organizations as well. If you all ever need this for anyone else in your organization to have, because we're not the only ones, feel free, let us know. Tracy can bring this into your organizations as well. Matt mentioned she is willing to sometimes travel as well.
I
So
love to travel, as Matt says. I mean, I'm your go-to. I spend a lot of time. I have a great car. I love my car. I drive everywhere, so I'm no problem. It's my
she's
me
willing to
time.
travel. All right. So thank you so much, Tracy. We really appreciated you spending time with us. And I will send out all of this information through an email later today. So be on the lookout for that. And have a great rest of your day. Great weekend, everyone. And we will see you next month. Bye,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks, Erin. Bye-bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Yep.